So the first question about risk management says, aside from the standard textbook information, what should be included in the definition of risk management? So we talked about how risk management involves protecting yourself from personal injury losses or financial losses due to unforeseen accidents, but we also talked about how important it is to have a rationale or a reason why you're following that risk management plan. The next question is, what is the best way to identify risk? And that's to actually walk around the property yourself and identify potential risky factors that you can take care of and reduce the risk of. What is the most common way employers use the transfer strategy in risk management issues? That can include getting private contractors to come in and do the work for you, because then they take upon all the responsibility. You also can have insurance policies in place, or you can have your participants sign a waiver. And who should be included in the risk management planning process. So you should start by having a manager and a committee, and then you need to give that committee and manager authority. And then you want to involve all employees in the planning process, and then you can set up some sort of training program to have a risk management plan. Next question, what is an emergency action plan and how does it differ from a crisis management plan? What are the critical components of each? So the emergency action plan is something that occurs when there actually is an emergency. It requires a team and it addresses the facility issues such as emergency evacuation, alarm systems, emergency medical services location. It also addresses equipment issues, like things that you would need in case of emergency, such as like a first aid kit, a backboard, and it also involves how employees will communicate with each other during the emergency. The crisis management plan occurs after the incident, so it's after the fact, and this involves how you would handle the incident in regards to your stakeholders, the organization itself, and the general public. For this, you want to address the media, and you should only have one person addressing the media. You also want to have counseling in place for those who are involved in the incident, and you also need to work on restoring the facility. That's part of the plan. And then you also want to prep for the possibility of maybe having to go on break from business operations for an unforeseen amount of time. So in this situation, the boys who are throwing the rocks are partially at fault because they fall in the age range of 8 to 14. They are partially responsible for what happened. But Jenny did have a legal duty to supervise the kids as it was her job. She could be considered negligent because she was on her phone. She wasn't living up to the responsibilities that she had. And the source for that duty comes from the position that she was put in as a counselor at this summer camp. So question 4 here looks at a waiver that was made for an indoor go-kart track. Some of the elements that are needed for a waiver are clear and concise language at an 8th grade reading level. You also need it to be clear that it is a waiver, so at the top it should say that this is a waiver. It must be voluntarily signed by someone who is either older than 18 or the legal guardian of someone who is under 18. It must have specific language about the risk or the activity that you're going to be involved in. It has to cover every risk that is associated with this activity, and it must not contradict public policy. So some of the things that is missing from this waiver is that it does not clearly say that it is a waiver. It doesn't have a place to sign for either a guardian or a person above 18, so it needs both of those. And it actually has nothing about the risks that are involved, so it needs to have that clear language that explains all the risks that are involved with this activity. So for question 5, we're looking at a facility that is changing their policies in regard to the use of medical marijuana. So how will the hiring procedures be affected? You should let people know that are interviewing right away your policy about medical marijuana. You should let them know that if they have a medical card, they're allowed to use marijuana. If they don't have a medical card, then they can't. You need to let them know that that is your policy right away. In the event of an accident, will employees be tested for marijuana use? I would say yes, that they should be if they don't have a medical card. And how will a positive test be handled? I think in that case, you should do an investigation with maybe an interview with them, asking them, were you using that day? You asked them to be honest. And if they were directly responsible for the injury and they were not allowed to be using marijuana, then I think that would lead to them being fired, and that needs to be explicitly clear in your policies for your employees. So next, will employees be drug tested? If so, who and how often? So in this case, we do know that drug testing does reduce the use of marijuana in the workplace. And if we were to do it, you would maybe do it randomly You could do it only with people that don't have a medical card, because those that do have a medical card, they'll probably get a positive, but it is perfectly allowed under your policy. You could do it on a monthly basis, maybe every 2 weeks. I would say probably on a monthly basis is what I would do, and I would do it completely randomly with employees that don't have a medical card. Next is, will you allow those with medical authorization to bring marijuana into the workplace? I would say no in this case, simply because some of the statistics that we had was that you're 55% more likely to be in an industrial accident, and there's a 75% greater chance for absenteeism. And between both of those statistics, I think it would just be better to keep it away from the facility. Make sure that nobody's using while they're working, because that could easily lead to an accident that you could be liable for. And then lastly, how will your company handle off-duty conduct? For example, what if an employee uses marijuana or tests positive on a drug and does not have permission to use medical marijuana? I think you need to set a strict policy. I mean, if your policy is that it's only people who have a medical card, then that person needs to be reprimanded in some way, whether it means that they're fired, whether they receive a dock in their pay or something. I would probably go with them just being fired, because you need to set a strict policy that you can stick to, and I think that's the easiest one to do.